Good afternoon and welcome to Canon Cymru revision sessions. This session will focus on Unit 4, Section B of your Shakespeare paper for A-level. It'll be presented by myself, Cathy Davies from Ysgol Gyfun Gymraeg, Brwmyrddin. And here I'll just go through the relevant subject content. So the intentions for today are to look at an overview for Section B, to approach the examiner commentary, see what kind of pros and cons that they've picked up on in the last examination series, and look at some specific terms that may be required when answering the question, and to have a look through an example answer. As usual, if you have any questions, please use the question and answer section and email over if need be. And the session, as you know, will be recorded and the resources will be uploaded to the e-sgol website in the Carlam Cymru area. Okay, so here's just a quick overview of your paper. Okay, so you'll be in, so this is your Unit 4 paper, the Shakespeare paper. So here you'll be expected to answer one question section A and one question section B. And the same Shakespeare play must be chosen for both sections. Okay, so you can't do one on Hamlet and one on King Lear, for example. Okay. Section A carries 45 marks and Section B carries 75 marks. And the number of marks that are awarded are always given in brackets at the end of each question or part question. So the advice is to spend around 45 minutes on the first section, so Section A, and around an hour and 15 minutes on the second section. Okay. So as you should know, this is a closed book examination. Okay, you're not permitted to take copies of your text into the exam. You must answer one extract-based question from Section A on your chosen set text and one from a choice of two on the same text in Section B. In both sections, you will need to demonstrate your ability to analyse how meaning and are shaped in drama text, to accurately use a range of kind of literary concepts and terms, as well as be aware of and be able to apply and discuss the knowledge and principles and conventions linked to drama and dramatic style. To be able to identify and consider how attitudes and values are expressed during the responses. Okay, so in text, to organise responses well and to use quotations accurately. In Section B, then, additionally, you will need to be able to show awareness of context, so relevant cultural contextual influences, and also consider and reflect upon different interpretations of literary text. So, you know, critical interpretations, alternative ideas, that type of thing, okay, and the idea of multiple readings. So here we just quickly go through the examiner commentary. So, as you know, closed book examination, and despite that, you know, the responses that have been seen in the last examination series were less descriptive and less narrative based, and you know, generally quite well selected material was shown. It is stated that by the examiners that it was nice to see a range of contextual material and critical sources being spoken about. Examiners were very impressed with Candy's ability to quote freely from their Shakespeare play, and also their ability on occasion to quote precisely from critical sources. So looking at your Ao5 there, too many instances of responses where examiners have to search in vain for evidence of engagement with Ao3 in Section B, and also for evidence of Ao5. So the word engagement here is really important, okay? So the idea of engagement with your critical sources, all right? So making sure that you are entirely linked with what you're doing, that you're using essentially what you're writing about when it comes to your context. So instead of just simply putting in the contextual detail as like an add-on, you need to make sure that you're responding to it, you're interacting with it. So, you know, argue for it, against it, link it to your Ao2 a little as well, okay? They're also a little bit concerned, objects here, about the quality of written expression. They believe that candidates are writing in a sort of poor style, quite informal, and not kind of sort of maintaining that expectation of this academic style and register. Many responses, especially to the extract, we saw candidates that had just simply written out chunks of the extract as textual support, and this applies for both section A and section B. You've got to make sure that when you are quoting, when you are finding textual support, that you need to use brief quotations. You need to make sure that they are short, sharp, precise. Okay, be specific. Okay, and make sure that you are answering the demands of the question fully as well. Okay, so here what you've got are examples of the types of questions you may come across. Okay, so you've got just the overview that you'll have at the start of your paper. So in your response, you're required to analyse how meanings are shaped, demonstrate understanding and significance of influence. So reminding you essentially here about the Ao5 here. Okay, the paper is telling you, it doesn't tell you Ao5, but it uses the same phrasing. So different interpretations, you need to be addressing that. Okay, and then the context, it uses the word. Okay, so Ao, Ao3. So make sure that you don't forget those aspects, because a number of responses come through with very little Ao5 and not enough Ao3. Okay, so both questions here. So we'll look at King Lear initially. So how far would you agree that in the bleak world of King Lear, Shakespeare leaves us in no doubt that loyal service earns no rewards, and King Lear makes his audience think in different ways about attitudes towards madness, discuss this view of the play. So there's two potentials there for Hamlet, for King Lear. Now we'll look at Hamlet. So religion is supernatural to blame for Hamlet's inadequacies as an avenger. How far would you agree with this view of the play? Women have no voice in this play. Their dramatic importance derives only from their treatment by men. Okay, so two very different questions there as well. Okay, but clear awareness of your context and your critical readings is what's needed. So just for your information, you've got your section B assessment grid. Okay, so going through the different bands, the different assessment objectives, but again, what you have to note is where the marks are being awarded. So Ao3 is worth 30 marks rather than the 15 for all of the others. Okay, so obviously we know that it's one that we really can't neglect and one that we really need to focus on. So when I'm saying you have to engage with and interact with your contextual readings, that is definitely a must here. So we're just going to go through a few phrases, okay, that you may come across. Okay, just some terms that just remind you of the types of things that you will pick up on. So alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds, especially at the beginning of words. So we'll just flick through these quickly. As you know, you'll have this as a revision guide, so you can go through the terms, look at the examples that are given, and see how then you can apply them to your own texts. Okay, a parody, so the mocking imitation of a literary work, or sometimes a parody within a play. Okay, sometimes quite sarcastic. Imitation. Foreshadowing. Okay, some quite important terms coming through here, where you get a hint of what is to come in the action of a play or a story. So just being mindful of those and keeping an eye out. So comic relief, often used in Shakespeare's plays. Okay, the use of a comic scene to interrupt a succession of intensely tragic, dramatic moments. The comedy of scenes, often comic relief, typically parallels a tragic action that the scenes interrupt. Occurs really regularly in Shakespeare's tragedies. The climax, that's a turning point of the action, the plot or the play of a story. So the climax represents the point of greatest tension in the work. So an idea would be, when it comes to these terms that you're going through here today, especially things like foreshadowing, climax, comic relief, reflect back on the play that you have been studying and think, oh, hang on, where is the climax in my play? Is there a scene which provides comic relief? And if there is a scene that provides comic relief, you may find that the characters that feature there are often quite lowly characters, as Shakespeare often used the kind of poorer, lower class characters in an effort to kind of play the fool and the joker. Conflict, a struggle between opposing forces in a story or play, usually resolved by the end of the work. The conflict may occur within a character as well as between characters. So it could be conflict as in internal, or it could be an external conflict. Okay, so think of those two words, so internal or external conflict. okay? Metonymy, so a figure of speech in which a closely related term is substituted for an object or idea. So an example, we've always remained loyal to the crown. So by using the object crown, you're basically saying that you've always remained loyal to the king or possibly to monarchy, okay? So cleverly used in a lot of Shakespeare's plays. So this is an important one as well, okay? Denotation, so that would be the dictionary meaning of a word. Writers typically play off a word's denotative meaning against its connotations, so or its associated implications. So exposition, then, the first stage of fictional dramatic plot in which necessary background information is provided. So, for example, in Hamlet, we'll be looking at a scene from Hamlet, the opening scene, and we get a sense then with the exposition that there is something sort of not quite right in the state of Denmark at that point, okay? So the exposition is really important and plays significant role there. Connotations, so the association is called up by a word that goes beyond its dictionary meanings. So often you get sort of references to maybe witching hour or darkness. So you've got to think about what do those words possibly suggest, okay? A satire, so literary work that criticises human misconduct and ridicules vices, stupidities, follies. Okay, a satirical work is how you'd maybe talk about it. Stage direction, we just skip through quickly. As you know, gives specific advice to actors, and it's, you know, essentially the rules that the playwright is setting, okay? It's their only control they've got over their play once it goes into the hands of a director. A subplot, so a subordinate or parallel plot in a play or story that coexists with or within the main plot. So again, with Hamlet, you've got kind of the play within the play where you've got the mousetrap scene, and you seem to have two separate kind of plots going along side by side there as well, okay? Setting, so the time and place of literary work that establishes a sense of context, okay, sort of when it was written, what was going on during that era, okay, and obviously the setting would allow you then an in and a way into Ao3, okay, because you'd use the setting, so the place, the time, in an effort then to link it to, so, you know, whether it be Elizabethan, Jacobean era, okay, and you use that then as your way into discussing your social contexts as well. So you've got the use of assonance, so repetition of similar vowel sounds in a sentence or a line of poetry or prose. I rose and told him of my woe, okay, so the A-I-O-U is there. Figurative language, you're probably quite familiar with all of these. A form of language use in which writers and speakers convey something other than the literal. So you get the use of hyperbole or exaggeration, an understatement, comparisons, okay, so different aspects of speech. Tone, often tone is the one that is underused by candidates in discussion, okay, and it is the implied attitude of a writer towards the subject and characters of a specific work. So always try and pick up on the tone, what tone is being sort of established and created. And tone often helps to contribute to this sense of like mood and atmosphere as well, okay? The use of irony then. Here we've got what essentially is a contrast or a discrepancy between what is said and what is meant, or between what happens, what is expected to happen. So you've got verbal irony and you've also got dramatic irony. So dramatic irony is what you'd be really focusing on here in your play, okay? So where a character speaks in ignorance of a situation or event known to the audience or to the other characters. So it's when the characters, the audience know more, essentially, when they've got more knowledge of what's about to happen, rather than what the characters on stage have got. Characterization, you're probably as well quite familiar with this. The way in which writers present and reveal a character, they often reveal them through aspects such as their speech, their dress, their manner, their actions, okay, you know, what other people say about them. So a number of different things that could be considered here, okay. Your antagonist, so the character or force against which another character struggles, okay, so the one that they come up against, and then obviously your protagonist, so the main character of a literary work. So you've got Hamlet and Othello, for example, in the plays that are named after them. The tragic flaw, so weakness or limitation of a character, resulting in the fall of the tragic hero. The tragic hero then, so a figure who is privileged and exalted, a character of high repute, who by virtue of a tragic flaw in fate suffers a fall from glory into suffering. A foil, so a character who contrasts and parallels the main characters in a play or story. So you've got Fortinbras in Hamlet, and obviously Prince Hamlet himself. Catharsis, so the purging of the feelings of pity and fear that occur in the audience of a tragic drama. The audience experiences a sense of catharsis at the end of the play, normally following some sort of disaster, some sort of catastrophe. Catastrophe, so the action at the end of a tragedy that initiates the denouement of falling actions of a play. One example is the dueling scene in Act 5 of Hamlet, in which Hamlet dies, along with Laertes, King Claudius, and Queen Gertrude. Okay, so a massive catastrophe where you know, there's a loss of life, a severe loss of life there. Symbol, so an object to action that stands for more than the object itself. A theme, so an idea of a literary work, which is kind of taken from the language of the character of the action, and it's quite sort of generalized. Then you've got tragedies, comedies, okay, the different types of dramas that you'll come across, in which you could maybe categorize your Shakespearean plays that you have been studying. Pathos, a quality of a play's action that stimulates the audience to feel pity for a character. Pathos is always an aspect of tragedy and may be present in comedy as well. And then you've got conventions, so customary features of a literary work, such as the use of a chorus in a Greek tragedy. These are the defining features of particular genres. And aside then, so thinking of the drama, ways which are spoken by an actor directly to the audience, so they're not heard by the other characters on stage during a play, but the other characters are present on stage, okay, at that point. Soliloquy, a speech in a play that is meant to be heard by the audience but not by other characters on stage. If there are no other characters present, soliloquy represents the character thinking aloud. So what we have to remember when we are looking at, say, Shakespeare uses soliloquy, for example, you've got to think about what is the purpose, what was his intent, why did he purposefully include soliloquy at that particular point, what is he trying to reveal about the character? Okay, so you've got to go that like extra distance where you kind of look at the impact of the soliloquy and the like dramatist's choices as well. Hyperbole, you should be familiar with this. The use of exaggeration. Diction is a section of words in literary works. Instead of saying the word choices by Shakespeare, you could just say the diction choice by Shakespeare. Dialogue then, so the conversation of characters in literary work. In fiction, dialogue is typically enclosed within quotation marks. In plays, character speech is preceded by their names. Staging, again, something really important. But think back to what we looked at last week, where we looked through sort of staging and all those different aspects in a bit more depth, okay? So make sure you look through that as well as a form of revision. So staging is the spectacle a play presents in performance, so where the actors are positioned on stage, what the background looks like, props, costumes, lighting, sound, okay, all of these different aspects that combine, okay. Stage directions then is what we're going to focus on a little, and the idea of staging. So stage directions generally tell the reader what the audience would be seeing on stage in terms of setting, staging, entrances and exits. So Shakespeare's stage directions are also important in helping to communicate to the audience character, action, situation and atmosphere. So key things that you could be considering, okay? in comparison with a dramatist like Tennessee Williams, who wrote detailed and very specific stage direction. Shakespeare's stage directions are understandably brief, as the stage had limited resources during that time, okay? So you've got to remember the era in which he's writing as well. So stage directions sometimes signal the use of props as well as signalling characters' behaviour. And then what you find with Shakespeare is that characters may also draw the audience's attention to an important prop used by Shakespeare to create this element of dramatic tension. Shakespeare relies a great deal on language and characters' monologues and dialogues to convey to the audience any stage effects or setting. So often what you get is a sense of setting and an awareness of setting being sort of forced almost through the characters' words, as we see characters often referring to the surroundings, such as the time of day, the weather, to help the audience imagine the situation and circumstances that are presented before them, okay? So these are things that you need to be considering. So if we look at the way in which Shakespeare uses weather conditions, so here we are looking at King Lear, we're in Act 3, Scene 1. So you've got a heath. Okay, so King Lear, Act 3, Scene 1. So set on a heath, it says storms, tells us storm still. And then we've got enter Kent and a gentleman severally. And then you've got Kent, who's there besides foul weather, one-minded like the weather, most unquietly. I know you, where's the king, contending with the fretful elements, bids the wind blow the earth into the sea, or swell the curled waters above the main, that things might change or cease, tears his white hair, which the impetuous blasts with eyeless rage catch in their fury and make nothing of, strives in his little world of man to outscorn the to and fro conflicting wind and rain. This night, wherein the cub-drawn bear would couch, the lion and the belly-pinched wolf keep their fur dry, and bonneted he runs and bids what will take all. So here what you've got, if we think about this, okay, is you've got the location being put across, okay? So a heath, okay? So with a heath, we assume that it's quite an isolated location. So there's a sense of isolation being presented, okay? And then it's almost as though Shakespeare's reminding us that there's this storm still. So clearly reminding us that the storm that was in previous scenes, okay, is continuing, okay? So it hasn't stopped, it's ongoing. There's a sense that it's quite relentless, okay? And then the opening line here, who's there besides foul weather, okay? So almost personifying the weather and the reference made here to the foul weather. It's almost as though we find there's this situation where we feel like he uses that adjective choice of foul to show that he finds the weather, or is terming the weather as quite offensive, quite repulsive, an immoral or evil sort of entity is what's being shown, okay, through the use of the foul here and that adjective choice. And then we get a sense, so the gentleman's response, one-minded like the weather, as in the weather's got one intent and one intent only, most unquietly, which is to disturb. Okay, so and the adverb choice here shows this sense of turbulence, okay, with the unquietly, so a sense of turbulence and like agitation almost as well, okay? So a real sense of mood and atmosphere being presented just through their discussion of the weather, okay? Because all we've been told is storm still. All right, that is the revelation that we've had through Shakespeare's stage directions, and that they're on a heath, which is some sort of isolated open land, okay? And it's through the words of the characters that we're actually being able to establish that sense of mood and atmosphere a little bit more, okay? So continues on with things like swell the curled waters, okay, here. You've got the idea of the fretful elements as well, a sense of eyeless rage, okay, so the idea of blind rage, okay, so again, if we think of blind linking to this particular play, the symbolism that's being used, okay, in Lear here. The impetuous blast, the idea of fury, the to and fro, conflicting wind and rain. So the types of words being used, so conflict, so something which is uneasy, unsettled. That's the impression that we're getting here from the words of Shakespeare's characters. rather than necessarily his stage directions. Okay, so looking quite closely at the words of the characters in order to establish that sense of mood and atmosphere. Then we move on to Act 1, Scene 1 of Hamlet. Like I said earlier, this is the opening scene. So we'll have a quick reader of this particular part, okay? And then we'll have a think about it. So it's split over 2 slides, okay? So you've got Shakespeare opens the play here with stage directions, showing sentries on guard on a platform at the castle. So immediately an atmosphere of unease is created by the staging and setting, as the audience at this point have no understanding of the reason behind the guarding of the castle. So this particular scene here begins in medias res, okay? So right in the middle of the action, okay? So right in the middle of action. So we as audience then have lots of questions. So the unease that's maybe presented here just adds to our questions as an audience as well, because we want to know what the reason behind them guarding the castle as well, okay? So it says here, here's your stage directions, okay? So Elsinore, the guard platform of the castle, Francisco at his post, enter to him Bernardo, okay? So we look at the dialogue here. So we got, who's there? Nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. Long live the king. Bernardo, he, you come most carefully upon your hour. 'Tis now struck 12, get thee to bed, Francisco. For this relief, much thanks, 'tis bitter cold and I'm sick at heart. Have you had quiet guard and not a mouse stirring? So if you look at the use of monosyllabic words here, okay? So monosyllabic, okay? So you've got like just one syllable words and answers. So from the guards here, and it characterizes them as sort of direct and sort of entirely focused on their duty, okay? So that use of like sort of short speech also carries a kind of a dramatic emphasis, and it adds to the tempo and the cadence as they have an impact on the rhythm, and it allows for a real sense of unease to be created. And if you notice, there's this use of questioning here. So look at the question marks here, okay? So in this opening section, you've already got 3 questions, okay? It's a constant question here in this particular part of the extract, as well as those short, sharp sentences that are being used, okay? Most definitely contribute to the dramatic tension. And we were saying earlier how Shakespeare uses the words of his characters to kind of contribute to setting. So you've got tis now struck 12, so we're thinking it's midnight, so we've got a sense of like witching hour, okay? Again, contribute to a sense of unease. And then the revelation of it is bitter cold, okay? So what the characters say have a real impact in this understanding, this sense of setting, okay? Continues then with Bernardo, well, good night. If you do meet Horatio and Marcellus, the rivals of my watch, bid them make haste. And at that point, Horatio and Marcellus enter. I think I hear them, stand ho, who is there? Again, use of questioning. Friends this ground, and liege into the Dane, give you good night. Oh, farewell, honest soldier, who hath relieved you? Bernardo hath my place, give you good night. And then they exit, and then you've got Marcellus stating, hola Bernardo, say, what is Horatio there? And then Horatio says, a piece of him. Welcome, Horatio. Welcome, good Marcellus. What has this thing appeared again tonight? Okay, so you've got, again, quite short questioning between the characters, okay? And there is this sense of, you know, these men on guard, these sentries on guard, are feeling quite uneasy and quite uncomfortable. And then you've got this last question here by Horatio. What has this thing appeared again tonight? Okay, and it has a really powerful impact on the audience that does, okay? Their initial sense of uncertainty and their initial sense of misgiving at the start of the scene, because they don't know what's going on, is confirmed by Horatio the scholar, okay? The reference to this thing provides a real sense of questioning about kind of the nature of what has been appearing, okay? And it leaves us a little bit sort of like on tenterhooks, because we want to know what this thing is. So we've got lots of questions as an audience now that are waiting for our characters on stage to answer. So already we are entirely engaged in the action, okay? We are gripped as an audience. So if you think of what Shakespeare is trying to achieve then, okay, in opening the play in such a way, he has got us entirely gripped, hasn't he, okay? So again, think back to the plays that you are studying. Do they open at the beginning in a certain way? Is that sense of engagement clear right from the outset? Okay, is there anything in particular that he does with his characters to get the audience on board? Because what we see here is that throughout the scene, there is this kind of building and this sense of anticipation through the use of language and this imagery of quiet, darkness, and things which are almost quite unnatural, okay? And what we see is this kind of quick exchange of dialogue between characters, which massively contributes to this creation of tension, okay? And then that question by Horatio just simply serves to intensify the feelings that are being created, okay? So these are the sort of things that you could pick up on when dealing with your dramas, okay? So here you've got, again, those same questions. We're going to be looking at this one in a little bit more depth, okay? We're going to look at an example answer, and we're going to look at the feedback that this particular answer has, okay? Again, whether you're studying Hamlet or Lear or whatever, okay, the same skills is what you can apply. So you can maybe print off the PowerPoint, you can go through this particular answer, you can look at the context, you can look at the critical readings, you know, get highlighters out, look at the Ao3, look at the Ao5 that's being included, and try and identify that in your own writing as well, okay? So when you are practicing your exam answers in preparation for your external exam in June, what you need to be doing is, you know, making sure you've got the right weighting and you've got the right balance, okay? So again, you can go over the mark scheme, you can have a look at this, okay? So gives you a good sense of what's expected. So if you look at, so they want to make sure that you've got informed responses, engaged responses, that is, you know, makes sense, is coherent, okay? Ao2 analysis gives you some examples of the types of things that the candidate could have picked up on, okay? But it's might pick up on. This is, you know, an examiner doesn't sit there with a list of things that you have to say. Anything is possible, but they give us examiners a list of things that may come up, okay? You know, these are all available, past mark schemes are all available on the WJC website, as well as some lovely work on the audience and staging, etc., with the blended learning that they have as well, okay? So make sure that you have a good look through that, because that most definitely will help you. Ao3 then, candidates must engage with a contextual focus in the question. So the presentation of women and their treatment by men obviously is where the question focuses. So here, references to cultural, political, religious and social context upon Shakespeare's writing. But maybe there'll be some consideration of how different audiences may or may not understand the presentation of women with no voice in this play, okay? The dramatic importance derives only from their treatment by men. So make sure that you're thinking of like the use of the audience here, okay? And again, reminding you to take into account the weighting of this Ao3, okay? Those who write extensively though about context are likely to penalise themselves, because obviously you won't be given enough attention to the other AO. So we don't want a history essay, we still want a literary essay, but you've got to ensure that obviously you are paying close attention to other aspects, but they need to be integrated relevantly into your discussions, okay? AO5 then, so telling you that you must engage with a given view, but you can approach AO5 in 3 ways. So by debating alternative ideas and readings of the material they've chosen from Hamlet, by engaging with critical material, including specific references and quotations from other readers, or all of the above, okay? Another thing that's important is to make sure that you maintain a tentative approach, okay? I've said this, I think, in every session, okay? But using that tentative language choice to make sure that you're showing that you are aware of other readings. So some may argue it could be viewed that others may perceive this as. So making sure you've got those keywords, those key phrases that sort of support this notion that you are not just kind of like, you know, tunnel vision, and that you are showing appreciation of other viewpoints, okay? So here's the response, okay? We'll have a quick read through some bits of this, okay? So the idea that all female characters within the play, within Hamlet, exist simply to showcase how they're treated cruelly by their male counterparts is one widely considered to be true by many critics in this quintessential Shakespearean play. So already you've got this link to many critics, okay? So thinking here about the Ao5. This concept is even more poignant when we consider that in the 1600s, all the women in this play would be performed by men, as at the time it was illegal for women to be educated and would thus be underqualified. So here you've got obviously your use of Ao3 coming in, okay? And we'd say that this was quite perceptive, okay? Quite a confident use of Ao3, the way that it's weaved nicely in, okay? So directly straight in, okay, and used in the sense of context. To commence, it's paramount to consider the extent to which Ophelia is sexualized, even by members of her own family. During Act 1, Ophelia is warned by her brother Laertes that her chastity is essential not only for her own dignity but for the honour of their family. He tells her, weigh what loss your honour may sustain, the imperative way, showcasing his demand for her to consider the consequences of the family's honour if she is to have premarital sex. This underlines how women in this play have no significant voice. So you've got quite mature use of Ao5, okay, where to consider the extent to which here it's paramount to consider the extent to which Ophelia is sexualized even by members of her own family, okay, a real awareness, okay. And then you've got here towards the end, so really quite confident Ao2, okay, use where the quotation is put in, okay, the textual support, and then focusing on the imperative, all right, showcasing his demand, so looking at what that does, all right, so just, you know, that close analysis of language is what's being shown, okay. As evidently Ophelia is not even in control of her own sexual endeavours, contemporary audiences would not be surprised at Laertes' advice, as it was highly shameful for women in the 17th century to have lost their chaste treasure before marriage. The noun treasure, deployed by Laertes to describe her virginity, emphasised the importance of this social custom. Okay, so here again you've got real, quite sound, quite secure use of Ao3, where the candidate refers to the 17th century to have lost their chaste treasure. So when we were talking earlier about Ao3 and the fact it's worth 30 marks and that it needed to be integrated, okay, look how this candidate is using Ao3 and Ao2 side by side, so backing up their Ao3 with evidence from the text, okay, that is the way to go about it. So continues then with this scene is enhanced by the knowledge of Shakespeare himself engaging premarital sex with his later wife, Anne Hathaway. Therefore, perhaps we can infer that he's presenting Ophelia as completely submissive to her brother's commands as a way of showing how stripping a woman of control over their own sexuality strips them of a voice and thus subtly challenges the patriarchy. Okay, again, real focus on the question. So you're looking at Ao1 here. Okay, clear question focus. Confident, thoughtful reading, okay? So those are the sort of things we need to be thinking about. This sexualization continues when he tells her that Hamlet's pursuit of sex with her is like a canker worm invading a delicate flower before its butterflies have had chance to bloom, okay? Again, your Ao2 here, okay, the canker worm's a close kind of link to the language here. And then the analysis, this analogy of the female genitalia demonstrates how Ophelia is perceived even by her brother as being suitable only for pleasing men. Okay, so the Ao2, really confident, really appropriate. Okay, so real sense of confidence. Okay, with the Ao2 choices here. Okay, The idea of a grotesque worm spoiling the flowers is similarly utilised only to highlight the implications that being unchaste has on the family. So here you got the sense of, again, the Ao2 really perceptive, really focused, okay, analysis. And then you've got the use of the quotation here from the critic. So therefore, as critic Herman Euclid suggested, Ophelia is presented utterly powerless, not just in terms of her own body, but over her fate. So that critical reading there, so Ao5, really mature, really confident, and just adds to that argument that the candidate has, okay? However, it is not only Ophelia whose presence serves to demonstrate how sexualized she is within the play. Gertrude is also treated as such, despite her elevated position in society as queen. In Act 1, Scene 2, so real focus, real awareness, okay? Hamlet begrudgingly describes her, how she moved with such dexterity to incestuous sheets, the use of sibilance and the phrase incestuous sheets, exhibiting his seething rage at her. Okay, so here again, your Ao2, okay, really confident, apt, okay, so apt, appropriate support being given here, okay? Really focused on the question as well, all right? Okay, so this sexualization continues when he tells her that Hamlet's pursuit of sex with her is like a cankerworm. Oh, we've done that, sorry. However, it's only Ophelia. Sexual actions, this is where we are. Sexual action with the late king's brother. Here, not only is Gertrude serving as a target for Hamlet to direct his rage, but his mention of incest emphasizes how contemporary and indeed modern audiences should disapprove of her actions at the time. Okay, so thinking about different audiences here, so you've got your Ao3 really clear, okay, really perceptive comments being made here, okay, with the Ao3. Contemporary audiences would be extremely familiar with how Henry VIII broke off from the Church of Rome in order to commit incest, okay, lawfully to Catherine of Aragon. However, he later divorced her due to his regret over ignoring Leviticus 18. Gertrude, of course, acts solely as the partaker of incest instead of being a powerful queen. Hamlet's description of her actions intended to turn the audience against her. Okay, so really quite clever points being presented. Interestingly, we never hear her opinion on the matter. Okay, so the idea of her being silenced, she is truly voiceless in that respect. Not only does Hamlet sexualize her, but persists to convey her as powerless. Okay, so we're thinking of the Ao1 there, really accurate reading, okay? Okay, so a sound, quite accurate reading being presented there, okay? He exclaims, "Frailty, thy name is woman." This deeply misogynistic outburst targeted at his own mother, leading us to believe that she is a rather helpless ruler. Okay, and then continues with like quotations from Rebecca Smith, okay, from critic Rebecca Smith here. Okay, again, what you've got is this use of Ao5, okay, again, mature and confident. And the response continues in the same vein, okay? And there is this, you know, again, like I said, go through it and make sure that you have a look at the use of Ao3 and Ao5, okay? But you'll see the way in which it concludes. So in conclusion, I'm of the opinion that women are in fact presented as voiceless vehicles for more riveting dramatic performances by the male characters. However, I believe this was purposely done by Shakespeare to illustrate just how ridiculously passive and submissive women were forced to be during that era, as he would have witnessed firsthand the abuse his wife received just for making a sexual choice that could have ruined her future. So you've got that really sort of quite purposeful Ao5 coming in at the end, okay? And if we look at the marks that would be awarded to this, this would have been given Ao1, it would have had 13 out of 15, Ao2, 14 out of 15, Ao3, so this out of 30, remember now, 24, and Ao5, it would have had 15 out of 15, okay? So very sound, so total of 66, okay, out of 75, okay? Very sound, a very purposeful response, Okay, so, but like I was saying, go through it, highlight, make sure you're aware of how the AOs work with one another, okay? And notice how with this particular candidate, there's no kind of tag-ons of AOs, okay? There's no AO3 just thrown in for good measure. We've got them weaved quite intricately and quite nicely in, and everything links to the text, okay? Everything links to the textual support, the AO2, okay? The quotations. All right, well, best of luck to you in your external examinations. And like I said, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch on email. Okay, thank you.